Risk of Rain 2 has an amazing mod store on PC that makes modding the game incredibly easy. I browsed through hundreds of mods myself and asked the community for their favorite mods to compile this giant list of the best mods that are available for Risk of Rain 2 right now. I've categorized them into 4 sections so you can jump around through the video and find exactly what you need. We've got quality of life mods, aesthetic mods, gameplay mods, and lastly, survivor mods. Quick disclaimer, not all of these mods are going to be compatible with each other or multiplayer lobbies. Make sure you go and visit and read the website for each mod you plan on trying. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into quality of life mods. Okay, so first up is better UI. This is probably the single best mod to use when you're first starting to learn the game. Better UI can potentially do a lot, like add a DPS meter, show various stats on the right side of the screen like your jumps and crit chance, but I primarily use it for the item description and skill proc coefficient information. When hovering over any item in your inventory, Better UI shows you exactly what that item does, how it stacks, and how your current stacks are being calculated. It also shows you the proc coefficient of all of your skills too, both of which are insanely helpful when you're first starting to learn how the game works. Next up is Item Exchange Notifier. Have you ever used a 3D printer and had to think to yourself, man, what the fuck did it just take from me? Well, with Item Exchange Notifier, that'll never happen again, because every time you use a 3D printer, a chat log pops up notifying you of what item got traded out. It's super convenient, especially on long loop runs where it gets really hard to keep track of all your items. So just install this and never think about it again. Next up is Chests Be Gone, which removes all looted chests from the level once they're off screen. No more mistaking opened chests for new loot. Again, just install this and never think about it again. It's so nice. Random character selection allows you to select a random character. If you click this button in the top left of the menu, it'll select a random survivor for you, and you can click the button below it if you also want a random loadout. I don't know how this isn't just in the base game already by default. It's perfect for when you want to just like casually play and relax, and feels like a very vanilla option. Next up is Command Queue. Command Queue lets you queue which items you want during artifact of command runs. Honestly, this mod is a must-have for you command players out there because it saves you so much time and headache from picking out your items every time you get a new one. Just set your build at the very start of the run and let the mod take care of it all for you. No boss, no wait causes the teleporter to charge instantly once you've killed the boss. No more waiting around for the teleporter to reach 100 while you just kind of sit there. It even adds the time that it would have taken to charge it to the timer so it doesn't throw off the difficulty scaling too much. Next is RT Auto Sprint. Don't stand still, don't get hit, right? This mod attempts to make sprinting easier as you automatically sprint whenever possible. This is definitely going to be a more personal preference thing, as some players will definitely want to keep the finer control of the base game, but Hunters players go crazy, you know what I'm saying? Skip Intro does exactly that. It skips the intro. This mod skips the intro cutscene so you no longer have to spam the spacebar after loading into the game. Install it and never think about it again. Next up is Actually Faster, which speeds up the use of things like scrappers, printers, and the Shrine of Chance. No more waiting around for the animation to play out before you can throw in your next item. This mod kind of speeds up the game a little bit, technically, so it makes it easier, technically, but it's very minuscule and you can be your own judge on if you want this or not. Seer Ping helps you identify which stages are being displayed by these seers in the Bazaar. Just ping them and their name pops up in the chat. No more squinting trying to figure out if you're looking at Siren's Call or Sundered Grove. Just install this and never think about it again. Next up is Quick Restart, which adds a button in the pause menu that allows you to restart your run with the same survivor and loadout. Did you make a mistake in your run and you want to restart? Or do you want to just re-roll the first stage until you get something other than Siphon Forest? Then this mod is for you. It also adds a button that just takes you right back to character select screen if you want to just change survivors quickly. Next up is Unlock All, which unlocks everything in the game. Do you not want to do all the challenges to get all the items, skills, or eclipse levels? Then just use Unlock All and get access to everything immediately. Next up is Aerolt, which is an insanely powerful cheat engine for Risk of Rain 2. You can edit basically everything in the entire game, and I mean everything. Of course, you can change your own items, but you can also change your own character's stats. You can spawn in anything that you want, including enemy survivors, which I think is pretty neat. It's insanely useful if you're a content creator and you're trying to get to like specific stages to take certain shots of stuff like that. It's so strong. And one of the coolest things is you can spawn in as any enemy that you want. Like, look at us. We're a Clay Dunestrider now. That's just who we are. It's awesome. And with that, we are done with quality of life. Let's move on to the aesthetics. Of course, we can't talk about aesthetics without first talking about stage aesthetic. This mod changes the textures and the color palettes of all the stages. Each stage gets about 5 or 6 additional looks that can be randomly selected on your runs, and this does a ton to add some variety into how the game looks. It's also highly customizable from within the game's menu. This is one of my favorite aesthetic mods, and I never play a game without it. Next up is Risk UI. Risk UI is an attempt to completely overhaul the heads-up display in Risk of Rain 2. It's highly customizable and uses a very crisp and clean design that almost looks minimalistic. You can have the text color change depending on the difficulty that you're playing, reposition any element of the UI, and change the color to almost anything. Give this a look if the default UI is getting a little bit too boring for you. The minimap mod adds a minimap. It looks kinda goofy, but if you like minimaps from a top-down perspective, this mod's for you. It shows you all the near enemies around, as well as all the interactables within your vicinity. Next up is photo mode. This adds a photo mode that you can use whenever you pause the game. Use it to take pretty pictures of yourself anytime during your runs. Next up is first-person Redux. First-person Redux adds a toggleable first-person camera mode to the game. It can be a bit clunky and look a little weird with certain survivors, but I always use it whenever I play Railgunner because it makes zooming in feel much more natural and less disorienting. Discord Rich Presence is a mod for all you Discord warriors and admins out there. This mod adds a ton of information about your game to your Discord profile. It allows your friends to see what level you're on, the survivor you're using, the difficulty, and a few other things. If you use Discord, just install this and never think about it again. Next up is Water Tweaker. And Water Tweaker changes the water texture in Wetland Aspect and makes it far easier to see chests and items when they're underwater. Again, install this, load this up, set it to about 0.5, that's what I have mine at, and then never think about it again. And lastly, there's Mad Veteran Skin Pack, which is a skin pack that aims to create skins for all survivors that are references to their meta builds. Engineer gets mushrooms, Commando gets little machine guns, Loader gets armor, and so on. It's one of the only skin mods that I feel is somewhat vanilla in design, which I really like, and the skins just look really good too. There's also an insane amount of skin mods in the mod store, way too many to talk about in this video, so I encourage you to go and check some of them out for yourself. But with that, we're done with aesthetics, so let's move on to gameplay and strap in, because we've got some really crazy stuff in this section. Okay, first up we have the Genetic Artifact mod, and this is one of the most interesting mods I've ever played. It adds a genetic modifier to the game that is insanely cool. All monsters have 4 stats that the artifact can change: their health, move speed, damage, and attack speed. As the run progresses, the artifact randomly modifies these stats for each monster, and then gives each monster a combat effectiveness rating after it dies. This rating then influences the next generation of monster stats, and so on. This leads to monsters adapting over time to the specific weaknesses of your build and exploiting it. This forces you to adapt your build and your playstyle constantly, and you can really feel these changes in the monsters as the game goes on. And the best part is the mod adapts you differently on each run, which leads to a ton of replayability. This mod is seriously super cool, and I highly encourage you to check it out. Okay, next up is Starstorm 2. Starstorm 2 is a general content update mod that brings a ton of stuff to the table. It includes 2 new survivors who both feel pretty good and fit along with the rest of the cast really well. It also brings new events and challenges that can happen during the runs, and brings over 20 additional items to the game. If you're looking for a single mod that adds the most amount of content, this is probably it. Next up is the Ancient Wisp mod, which adds a new late game boss, the Ancient Wisp. This boss is pretty fun to fight. It's got a lot of new and interesting attacks, and they can be pretty dangerous if they're stacked on top of each other. It also adds some good variety to late game bosses, which is pretty nice. Next up is the standalone Ancient Scepter mod. This mod adds a new red item to the game, the Ancient Scepter. This item randomly upgrades 1 skill on every survivor. Every vanilla survivor has an upgrade to multiple skills, so Engineer could get more turrets, Commando could throw 8 grenades at once, and Mercenary could get a huge upgrade to his ultimate. These upgraded skills are super fun to use, and each skill will significantly impact your build in very different ways. Multitudes is a mod that allows you to scale the game as if you had more players in the lobby. You can get the loot equivalent of 8 players if you want, but you'll also have to fight the monster equivalent of 8 players. It's a very fun and customizable challenge if you want Risk of Rain 2 to just be more Risk of Rain 2, but it's also pretty hard. The footage here is me fighting an 8-player lobby version of a teleporter event plus Shrine of the Mountain. It can get pretty crazy, but I've heard that the mod has also been tested with up to 250 players, so I guess go nuts. Next up is Vanilla Void, which adds more Void items into the game. In its current state, it adds 5 white, 4 green, and 1 red Void item into the game. Some of these items even have multiple variants that you can choose from in the mod settings. If you like the concept of Void items, this mod is for you. Fogbound Lagoon is a mod that adds a new Stage 3 to the game. This stage is incredibly well made in my opinion, and really feels like a stage that Hopoo could have implemented themselves. In the Fogbound Lagoon, you will spend a decent amount of time underwater, as there is a gigantic lagoon for you to explore and loot through. And the change in gravity when underwater makes the stage very unique, and as a bonus it works well with stage aesthetic. Next up is Bigger Bazaar, and this mod makes the bazaar slightly bigger. Behind the lunar items that you can buy are a row of regular items to buy from chests as well. Now the mod does limit the amount of items you can buy, so it's not like insanely broken, but it's still a little broken. You can get some crazy runs using this thing. Next is the Inferno mod, which adds another difficulty setting after Monsoon. You can see all the stats that it changes here, like increased enemy projectile speed, improved enemy AI, and some reworked abilities of enemies. This mod is actually crazy hard, and it took me a lot of attempts just to get past stage 3. But if Inferno isn't enough for you, there's always the More Difficulties mod, which adds 5 new difficulties to the game, including Armageddon. And Armageddon is an exercise in masochism. Among other things, enemies start with a Behemoth, Shattering Justice, 57-leaf Clover, Molten Perforator, Oddly Shaped Opal, and a Cautious Slug. Oh, and they have a 10% chance to crit. I tried for a long time and could barely get past the first stage after hours. Attempt this at your own risk. And while we're still on the topic of difficulty mods, let's talk about Umbral Mithrix. This mod completely overhauls the Mithrix fight, making it much, much harder. Mithrix has an entirely new moveset, different phases, new mechanics, and a new look to go along with it. Overall, I'm just shocked at how high quality this mod is. All the new visuals look amazing, and the flow of the fight from face to face is arguably better than vanilla, even though it's harder. Much harder. I love charging pillars, said not a single fucking person in the history of ever. Instead, let's make them into boss fights with Lunar Apostles. This mod replaces all the pillar events on the moon with boss fights with the souped up scavengers from A Moment Hole. These fights are great tests for your build before fighting Mithrix, and it's a great way to farm lunar coins as well. One of the latest mods on this list is Boss Rush. Boss Rush is an alternate game mode that sees you fighting against 9 bosses one after the other. After you kill a boss, you get a bunch of loot to choose from to further progress your build and to get ready for the next boss. You also have the option of hitting one of 2 shrines before each boss fight starts. Hitting the Void Touch shrine makes the next boss become Void Touch, but also has it drop Void items upon death. And the Moon Shrine makes the boss perfected, but also has a chance to drop lunar items. It's a great risk versus reward for a boss rush. This mod is also very new and kind of bare at the moment, but the maker plans on continuing working on it and updating it in the future. Also, the mod works with other boss mods, so here I am fighting Umbral Mithrix instead of regular Mithrix. Alright, last but not least for this section, I want to talk about the Risk of Rain 2 Randomizer. Yes, the randomizer mods popularized by Souls games and Pokemon have made their way into Risk of Rain. This mod randomizes pretty much everything in the game. Stages, enemies, enemy attacks, items, status effects, you name it, it's probably randomized. You can get a run like this, where the very first stage is a moment fractured, and you end the run without killing a single enemy. Or you can get a Halicon seed that spawns a tiny beetle to help you during the teleporter event. I also called in some backup drones, but instead got friendly parents. Thankfully, this mod is highly customizable, and it has some really nice replayability potential as well. You can also pair this mod with the randomized artifacts mod to get some really crazy runs going. Okay, and with that, we are done with gameplay mods. Let's move on to the last section, character mods. And first up, we have the Enforcer. The Enforcer is a very popular character mod that lets you live out a Giga Tank power fantasy. You're equipped with a mediocre shotgun that has insanely good proc coefficient and a riot shield. Your special ability has you get behind your riot shield to block 100% of incoming damage from the front while also buffing your shotgun. Look at how this Stone Titan just crumbles in front of me while I block all of its abilities. Sure, it causes you to no longer sprint or be able to jump, but who needs to when you have 100% damage reduction? Not the most balanced character ever, but insanely fun and well made. Next up is Pathfinder, which is a little less popular survivor mod, but a very well made one. You get a pet hawk named Squall that accompanies you on your runs and obeys your commands. Squall inherits all your items and can be ordered to attack enemies based on a cooldown. Your abilities besides Squall are kind of underwhelming and crowd control based, so the survivor primarily relies on managing your cooldowns effectively and positioning well during engagements. If you like engineer or minion based builds in other games, I strongly encourage you to check out Pathfinder. The Millennia mod lets you play as one of the hardest bosses in Elden Ring, Millennia. She's a strong melee character with a slow attack speed, but every attack heals you for a percentage of your total health. The skills that she has you perform are some of her most famous in-game combos, and of course, her special ability is Waterfowl. She's extremely similar to Mercenary in a lot of ways, but is slower, tankier, and relies a lot more on healing. It also says victory achieved at the end of each boss fight, which I think is fucking awesome. Next up is Chef, who is an original survivor from Risk of Rain 1. He is a cook that specializes in throwing meat cleavers and roasting enemies to death. His M1 throws a cleaver that pierces all enemies and boomerangs back to you, piercing all of them again. His M2 and his mobility skills work together in the sense that you're meant to use his mobility skill to lay out all this oil on the ground, and then use your M2 to light the whole thing on fire, barbecuing anything that happens to be standing inside of it. Chef is a very simple character compared to the others on this list, but I kinda like that. His combos are super fun to use, and his builds are very straightforward. All in all, very fun survivor to play. If you're a fan of Dragon Ball Z, you're probably going to want to check out this next mod, Goku. Goku is probably the most complex character in this video. You have a ton of abilities at your disposal at all times. Abilities don't work off cooldowns and rather work off a mana system called Ki. Ki slowly builds up over time and as you fight things, and you can spend it to do stuff like teleport, fly, and Kamehameha. You can also go Super Saiyan for a short duration, which changes and buffs all of your abilities. And as you level up, your Super Saiyan level also increases, leading to very insane late game potential. Try them out if you're a fan of the series, or if you just like pressing a lot of buttons. And if you like this mod, look out for the Trunks mod, which is another survivor from the DBZ universe. Next up is Rocket, who is a survivor that focuses exclusively on explosives. You are equipped with a rocket launcher and some C4 to cause explosive mayhem on the planet. Your rocket launcher needs to reload, but it packs a very large punch, and the AoE can be great for clearing out large clusters of enemies. This is another pretty simple but very well made survivor. And since I already know you're thinking about it, yes, ICBM is completely busted on this guy. If you like rocket launchers and explosions, do yourself a favor and check out Rocket. The next survivor mod is Soldier. Soldier is a direct rip of the Soldier class from Team Fortress 2. You come equipped with your rocket launcher, shotgun, and trusty shovel to take down your foes. And yes, you can rocket jump. I know the community seems to really like this mod, but personally, I was a little underwhelmed. The sound design is very weak. It can be really hard to tell if you're firing your rockets or not, and the only way to do real meaningful damage is to rocket jump into a shovel attack, which for some reason does an obscene 2,500% damage and is guaranteed to crit. If you like TF2, it might be a good pickup, but the previous character is better in almost every way in my opinion. Next up is Ganondorf, and this mod tries to take Ganon from Super Smash Bros. Ultimate and port him into Risk of Rain 2. He comes with a lot of attacks from the game, including jabs, dash attacks, neutral air, down air, and neutral B among others. His side B allows you to grab any enemy and do massive damage, including bosses, but watch out because this move is a little bit buggy. He's a slow and tanky melee survivor that has some pretty crazy damage potential and is overall just really fun to play. And rounding out the list is Heretic. Heretic is a survivor that utilizes all the Heretic lunar items that replace your skills. This is probably going to be pretty personal preference based. If you like the heresy skills, you're probably going to like Heretic. He looks pretty sick as a survivor, but besides that, what you see is what you get. It's just all the heresy skills in one place. Take from that what you will. And that does it! We have covered over 50 mods for Risk of Rain 2. What do you think? Did I miss any of your favorites? Let me know in the comments below. I also stream Risk of Rain 2 on Twitch. Come by and yell at me in chat, tell me I'm bad at the game. I already did. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next time.
You're relaxed. You should.